They say desperation sharpens the eyes. On a January morning cold enough to freeze breath mid-air, I learned that was true. My daughter Emma, 8 years old, walked beside me with her backpack stuffed with everything we owned. 3 changes of clothes, a blanket, her mother's photograph. We'd been sleeping in my truck for 2 months, but the engine had died 3 days prior, and the shelter turned us away because I'd missed the lottery cutoff by 11 minutes. The frozen lake wasn't a destination. It was where my feet stopped working. Through the morning glare on the ice, I saw something dark beneath the surface, geometric, deliberate. At first I thought it was a shadow trick, but as the sun climbed higher, the shape clarified. It looked like the corner of a roof, maybe 15 feet down, preserved in that crystalline tomb. Emma pressed her face to the ice. "Daddy, is that a house?" A house. Submerged, forgotten. By noon, I'd walked the perimeter and found the shoreside remnant, a stone foundation barely visible through snow and saplings. The county tax map, printed from the library computer before they kicked us out, confirmed it. Lot 47B, last assessed 1987, marked flooded, condemned. No owner listed, no lien. Just a line that read, "Salvage rights unclear." That night we slept in the foundation's corner, where 3 walls still stood. Emma asked if the house under the ice was magic. I told her it was memory, someone's home drowned when they built the dam upstream. "Can we bring it back?" she whispered. I didn't know, but I knew we had nowhere else to go. Chapter 1. The House That Drowned. The coldest nights are the loudest. Wind finds every gap, every missing shingle, every broken window frame. That first night in the foundation ruins, I listened to the lake creak and snap, the ice contracting in the dark. Emma slept against me, her breath warm on my chest, while I stared at the stars through the missing roof and wondered what kind of father builds hope on a flooded foundation. Morning came with brutal clarity. The structure beneath the ice wasn't just visible, it was preserved, like an insect in amber. Through the clear winter ice I could see the peak of a shingled roof, the dark rectangle of a window, even what looked like a chimney stub. The house had been well built once. Someone had cared. I spent the morning walking the property line using GPS on my dying phone battery. The foundation we'd slept in was the original shoreside garage or workshop, stone walls, good bones, 30 feet from the current water line. The main house had stood where the lake now spread, drowned in 1986 when the dam project raised the water level 12 feet. According to the brittle newspaper clipping I found tucked in the library microfiche, the owner, a man named Walter Graves, had refused to sell. The county condemned it anyway. He died 6 months later. No heirs, no sale, just abandonment and water. Emma found the first clue while I was measuring the standing walls. She called me over to a rotted wooden box wedged beneath a foundation stone. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that crumbled at my touch, was a leather journal and a rolled set of architectural plans. The journal was Walter's. His handwriting slanted left, pressed hard into the paper. The last entry, dated March 1986, read, "They can take the house, they can flood the valley, but they can't drown what I built into these stones. Everything a man needs to rebuild is in the foundation." I read it 3 times. Then I looked at the plans. They showed both structures, the main house and the workshop. But there were notations I didn't understand, measurements that didn't match, and a hand-drawn arrow pointing to the workshop foundation with the words, "Start here, core intact." By the time the sun started sinking, I'd made a decision that terrified me. We were staying. Not because I understood Walter's notes, not because I had money or tools or any sense of what I was doing, but because Emma had asked if we could bring it back, and I'd seen something in her eyes I hadn't seen since her mother died, a flicker of purpose, of forward motion. That night, I used the last of my cash and $17 to buy a tarp, rope, and a box of nails from the gas station hardware section. The clerk looked at me like he knew we were homeless, but he didn't say anything. Small mercies. I rigged the tarp across the corner where 2 walls met at a right angle, creating a crude shelter within the foundation. It cut the wind by half. Emma helped me weight the edges with stones, her small hands red with cold but determined. "Is this our house now?" she asked. "It's our start," I said. After she fell asleep, I sat with Walter's journal and a borrowed flashlight, reading by the weak yellow beam. He'd been a machinist, widowed young, who'd built his house with his own hands over 5 years. He wrote about salvaging materials, about measuring twice and cutting once, about the satisfaction of work that would outlast him. On the second to last page, he'd sketched something, a crude drawing of the foundation with measurements and the notation, 6 feet north corner, 3 down. Not for them. I looked at the dark corner of the foundation, then at Emma sleeping. Not tonight, but soon. The lake creaked in the darkness. Beneath the ice, the drowned house waited, holding its secrets in that frozen cathedral. Above ground, in these wind-scarred stones, another house wanted to breathe again. I didn't know if I could rebuild what was lost, but I knew how to start. 1 corner, 1 tarp, 1 night survived. Chapter 2. The first dig. 3 days in, I learned that hope runs on calories. We had granola bars, peanut butter, and water from the lake filtered through my t-shirt, a setup that would horrify any health inspector but kept us alive. Emma rationed her food without being asked, which broke my heart more than the cold. I waited until afternoon, when the winter sun warmed the foundation stones just enough to make digging possible. 6 feet north corner, Walter had written. 3 down. The ground was frozen, but decades of leaf matter had created a softer layer over the clay. I used a broken piece of rebar I'd found in the rubble as my excavation tool, chipping and scraping while Emma kept watch at the road. 2 feet down, I hit something solid. Not earth, not stone, metal. It took another hour to clear enough soil to reveal the outline, a steel box, roughly the size of a small suitcase, sealed with a padlock so rusted it crumbled when I hit it with a rock. Inside, 3 items that would change everything. The first was a thick envelope containing the original deed to the property, dated 1962, along with a surveyor's report that showed the pre-flood boundary lines. Walter's handwriting on a sticky note read, "Original survey," before they moved the markers. The second was a manila folder stuffed with receipts and invoices, materials Walter had bought and paid for, cataloged meticulously. Lumber, copper pipe, electrical wire, stone. All itemized, all documented. The third made me sit down hard on the frozen ground. It was a letter addressed to whoever finds this. Walter's handwriting, but shakier than the journal entries. "I know they'll flood it. I know I can't win. But I built this foundation to last 200 years. And I cached enough materials in the walls to rebuild when the water takes the house. They think they're drowning my life's work. They're wrong. They're preserving it." Inside the north wall, 3rd course of stone, I sealed 16 cavity spaces. Each one holds materials, nails, brackets, sealed copper fittings, electrical boxes, even seeds for the garden she wanted. Everything's wrapped in wax and rubber. Everything's waiting. If you're reading this, you need this place. So did I once. Build it back. Not for me. For whoever comes after. The county owes nothing. But this land remembers everything. W. Graves. I read it to Emma twice. She understood before I did. "He hid a whole house in the walls," she whispered. Not a whole house, but the bones of one. The expensive, impossible to afford pieces a homeless father with $17 could never buy. That night, I started carefully removing mortar from the north wall's 3rd course of stones. Behind the first one, exactly as Walter had described, was a sealed cavity containing a leather wrap. Inside that, a bundle of copper pipe fittings, still bright, wrapped in wax paper. Behind the second stone, electrical junction boxes and wire nuts, sealed in a rubber pouch. The third, a mason jar full of galvanized nails, sorted by size. Emma watched me line them up on the foundation edge, her eyes wide. "He left us treasure." "He left us a chance," I said. But the real treasure was still to come, and I didn't know it yet. Chapter 3. Breaking Ground. The first repair was symbolic, fixing the gap in the north wall where I'd removed the stones to access Walter's caches. I used his nails, his level technique described in the journal, his mortar recipe, which he'd written on the back page, 3 parts sand, 1 part cement, water until it holds a peak like meringue. Emma mixed while I laid. It took us 6 hours to reset 4 stones, but when we finished, the wall was solid. Wind no longer howled through that gap. That night, for the first time in months, we weren't cold. News of our presence spread faster than I expected. The gas station clerk must have mentioned us, because on day 7, a truck pulled up driven by a woman in her 60s wearing a Carhartt jacket and an expression of pure suspicion. "You squatting on Graves's property?" she asked. "I found the deed," I said carefully. "No heirs, no lien. County records say salvage rights are unclear." She studied me for a long moment. "I'm Doreen Kemper. I was Walter's neighbor before the flood. That man was stubborn as granite and twice as solid." She looked at the repaired wall section. "You using his mortar recipe?" "Yes, ma'am." "Meringue Peak?" "Meringue Peak." Something shifted in her face. She went to her truck and returned with a toolbox. "You'll need these more than I do. Walter lent them to my husband in '85. Never got the chance to return them." Inside, a hammer, a pry bar, a handsaw, a level, and a folding ruler marked with Walter's initials. "There's a town meeting next week about winter shelter funds," Doreen said. "I'll make sure they know someone's actually using this land for something." After she left, Emma asked if we were in trouble. "I don't know," I admitted, "but we keep building." Over the next 10 days, I opened 8 more wall cavities. Each one revealed another element of Walter's hidden reconstruction kit. PVC pipes, sealed window hinges, door latches, roofing nails, even packets of screws organized by size and labeled in his precise handwriting. Most miraculous, behind stone 19, I found 3 small mason jars of seeds. Walter had labeled them in 1985. Tomatoes, Helen's favorite, beans, Pole, Kentucky Wonder, sunflowers for birds and beauty. Helen, his late wife, the garden she'd wanted. Emma held the sunflower jar like it was made of crystal. "Can we plant them?" she whispered. "Not until spring," I said. "But yes, we'll plant every single one." The foundation was teaching me its secrets. The north wall held hardware. The east wall, where I started excavating next, held 3 bundles of pressure-treated lumber, wrapped in tar paper and somehow still sound after 40 years of entombment. But the south wall, the one facing the lake, held something else. I found it on day 16, behind a stone that resisted removal. When it finally came free, the cavity behind it was larger than the others, and it held a wooden box marked, "For whoever comes next. Open only if you're staying." Inside was a second letter from Walter, along with something that made my hands shake. "If you've gotten this far, you're committed." Good. But you need to know, the county flood maps were wrong. They moved the boundary markers before the survey to claim an extra 30 feet of land. I caught them, but I couldn't prove it alone. In this box, the original survey stakes I pulled before they could destroy them, and a photograph of the county crew moving them. It's dated and witnessed. The house under the ice? It's on land that should never have been condemned. The real property line runs through the lake. If you can prove it, if you challenge the flood map, this land might be worth something. Maybe enough to build properly, but it'll mean lawyers and time and faith that the truth matters. Your choice, just like it was mine. Keep building. Keep remembering. W. I stared at the photograph, grainy, black and white, showing 3 men in county uniforms pulling survey stakes and replacing them 30 feet lakeward. The date stamp read March 3, 1986, 3 months before the flood. Emma looked at the photo, then at me. "Did they steal the house?" "Maybe," I said. "Can we steal it back?" I didn't answer. I didn't know. But I tucked the photo and the letter into Walter's journal, and I kept building. If you're enjoying this journey so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Chapter 4. The Storm That Tested Everything. February came in angry. I'd patched enough of the foundation to create 2 weatherproof corners, one for sleeping, one for our growing cache of Walter's materials. The tarp held against wind, but leaked in 3 places during rain. Emma and I spent our nights shuffling between dry spots, our blankets soaked, learning the hard geometry of water and shelter. On February 11th, the temperature dropped to 8 degrees, and the forecast called for a blizzard. Doreen showed up at dawn with sleeping bags, a propane heater, and news. County meetings tonight. Some folks think you're just squatting and should be evicted before you get hurt. Others think Walter would want this. It's gonna be a fight. I looked at Emma, then at the foundation, our foundation now, layered with 40 days of work and Walter's ghost guidance. I'm going, I said. You sure? Storm's coming. You leave her here alone. I'm not leaving, Emma interrupted. I can keep the heater going. I can wait. She was 8. She shouldn't have to be that brave. But we were out of choices. The meeting was held in the basement of the Methodist church. 23 people crowded around folding tables. I stood in my work clothes, smelling like wood smoke and lake water, while they debated my existence. He's trespassing on county land, argued Jim Schaefer, who I later learned owned a real estate company. That property's been abandoned 40 years. It should be auctioned. The deed says otherwise, Doreen countered. She'd brought copies of the documents I'd found, including Walter's original deed. No county auction was ever held. The land was condemned, not seized. This man has as much right to it as anyone. For what? Schaefer shot back. To live in ruins with a child? That's not rehabilitation, that's danger. I didn't plan to speak, but I pulled out Walter's letter, the second one, about the moved boundary markers, and I read it aloud. The room went silent. If what Walter wrote is true, I said, the county flood map was fraudulent. The house under the ice shouldn't have been flooded, and if I can prove that, this land might actually belong to Walter's estate, which means it's still available for legitimate salvage rights. Schaefer's face went red. That's a serious accusation. It's a documented accusation, I said, laying the photograph on the table. Dated March 1986. Witnessed. The county clerk, a tired-looking woman named Margaret, picked up the photo. She studied it for a long time. Then she looked at me. I'll need to check the original survey records, she said quietly. But if this is accurate, someone needs to answer for it. And in the meantime? Doreen pressed. Margaret hesitated. In the meantime, if he's actively rehabilitating the structure and not creating a public hazard, I see no immediate cause for eviction. She looked at me. But you'll need to prove progress, photos, documentation, and if the child's welfare is ever in question. Understood, I said. I drove back through the first snowflakes, my hands shaking on the wheel of Doreen's borrowed truck. When I reached the foundation, Emma was sitting by the propane heater with Walter's journal open on her lap, reading by flashlight. Did we win? She asked. We bought time, I said. The blizzard hit at midnight. Wind screamed across the lake, driving snow sideways through every gap we hadn't sealed. The tarp ripped free at one corner, snapping like a gunshot. Emma and I huddled in the sleeping bags, the propane heater glowing between us, while outside the world tried to bury us. At 2 a.m. something shifted. A grinding sound, then a crack. Part of the west wall, the weakest section, collapsed inward under snow weight. We scrambled out of the way as stones tumbled, destroying our supply corner. Walter's carefully cached materials scattered across the floor. Emma screamed as a foundation stone landed 6 inches from her foot. I pulled her into the intact north corner, wrapped both sleeping bags around us and held her while she cried. Is it over? She whispered. Did we lose? I looked at the ruined wall, the scattered materials, the impossible task of rebuilding in a blizzard with an 8-year-old girl depending on me. No, I said. We adapt. By dawn, The storm had passed. The foundation was a disaster zone. One wall down, supplies scattered, everything covered in 8 inches of snow. But the north and east corners still stood. Walter's journal was intact, and beneath the snow, I could see the outline of his materials waiting to be gathered. Emma found me staring at the wreckage. She touched my arm. "Dad," she said, "Walter rebuilt once. We can rebuild twice." She was right. We spent 3 days sorting through the collapse, salvaging what we could. The lumber was wet but intact. Most of the hardware had been protected by the leather wraps. We lost some nails, a few brackets, but Walter had cached extras. He'd planned for failure, for storms, for hard days. He'd planned for us. Chapter 5. The house remembers. Spring came late but loud, ice cracking like artillery fire, snow melt rushing down the hillside, mud everywhere. By March, I'd rebuilt the west wall stronger than before, using the collapse as a lesson in engineering. Double-thick mortar, reinforced corners, stones selected for weight and fit, not speed. Emma, meanwhile, discovered something I'd missed. While I worked on the walls, she'd been exploring the foundation's floor, using a stick to probe the packed earth. On March 19th, she called me over to the southeast corner. "There's something hollow here," she said. I knelt and tested the ground. She was right. A distinct echo, different from the solid earth everywhere else. We dug carefully, using Walter's trowel and our hands. 2 feet down, we hit wood. Old, water-stained, but structured. A trap door. It took both of us to pry it open. Beneath, a space the size of a coffin, lined with stone and timber. And inside that space, wrapped in canvas tarp, a complete set of construction blueprints for a small house. Not Walter's original house, a new design, compact and efficient, labeled Foundation Rebuild Plan, 1986. He'd designed it to fit exactly within the old foundation footprint, using salvaged materials and the caches he'd hidden in the walls. There was more. Beneath the blueprints, 3 notebooks filled with construction schedules, material calculations, and cost estimates. Walter had planned the entire rebuild step by step, like a recipe for resurrection. The last page of the last notebook held a handwritten note. "If you found this, the house is yours to build. Not because you deserve it, but because you showed up. That's all life asks. Show up and keep going when stopping makes more sense. The county owes you nothing. The lake took what it wanted, but these stones remember when a house stood here, and stones are patient. Build it back, make it yours. And when you're done, leave something for whoever comes next. That's how we outlast the water." Walter Graves, March 1986. Emma looked at the blueprints, then at me. "Can we do it?" I studied Walter's plans. He'd accounted for everything, salvaged materials from the wall caches, dimensions that fit the foundation exactly, even a note about the spring water source uphill that could gravity feed to a tap. "Yes," I said, "but not fast and not alone." That's when Doreen showed up with a pickup truck full of volunteers. Over the next month, Walter's ghost plans became our daylight reality. The Methodist church community, moved by our story and the storm survival, donated weekends. A retired carpenter named Mike taught me framing. A plumber named Sarah connected the spring water line. Doreen's son delivered windows salvaged from a demolished school. The foundation grew walls. The walls grew a roof frame. The roof frame accepted metal sheeting donated by a farm supply store. By late April, we had 4 walls, a roof, and a door that locked. No electricity yet. No heat except a wood stove Mike had installed. But it was shelter. Real shelter. Emma planted Walter's seeds in the cleared ground behind the house. Tomatoes in a sunny patch, beans along a trellis Mike had built, sunflowers against the south wall where Helen had apparently wanted them. The county clerk, Margaret, returned in May with news. She'd found the original survey records. Walter had been right. The boundary markers had been moved, and the flood zone map was incorrect by 30 feet. The main house under the ice sat on land that should never have been condemned. "Does that mean we own it?" Emma asked. Margaret shook her head. "It means Walter's estate has a legitimate grievance against the county. but he died without heirs, and the statute of limitations. She paused. It's complicated, but there's precedent for adverse possession if you continue to maintain and improve the property for 5 years. 5 years. An eternity when you're 8. A blink when you're building something that matters. We'll stay, I said. That night, I sat in our house, with Emma asleep in the corner we'd designated her room, and I opened Walter's journal to the last entry. Beneath his final words, written in different ink, was a postscript I'd missed. P.S. If you're reading this years after the flood, and my house is still under that ice, don't grieve it. Houses are just wood and stone. But the act of building, the showing up, the trying, the leaving something better than you found, that's the part that doesn't drown. Build your version. Make it yours. Just don't forget mine. I looked through the window at the lake, where beneath the dark water, Walter's house rested in its frozen grave. I hadn't forgotten. I never would. Chapter 6. The place that breathes 2 years later. The house isn't just shelter, it's a presence. On quiet mornings, the walls creak as sunlight warms the wood. In storms, the roof sounds like a drum corps, rain percussion on metal. At night, the stones release the day's heat in a slow exhalation that keeps us warm. Emma is 10 now, tall enough to help me re-roof the shed we built last summer. The sunflowers Walter's wife wanted reach 12 feet high, their faces tracking the sun like neighbors watching a parade. The tomatoes produce more than we can eat. We give the excess to Doreen, who makes sauce and brings us jars labeled, "From Helen's Garden." The house under the ice is still there, visible every winter when the surface freezes clear. Some winters, tourists come to photograph it. The drowned house, the ghost under glass. I charge nothing, but I tell them Walter's story. About the county maps and the moved markers. About a man who couldn't stop the flood but could plant the seeds of resurrection. Last month, a documentary crew contacted me. They want to film the house, the story, the transformation from homeless desperation to rooted home. I said yes, but only if Emma approves. She asked one question. Will it help other people like us? The crew said yes. Emma said, okay. The legal situation resolved quietly. Margaret found a procedural error in the original condemnation. The county had failed to properly notify Walter's distant relatives of the flood action. One of those relatives, a great-niece in Oregon, signed over her rights to the property in exchange for a token payment and our promise to maintain Walter's memory. We paid her with money from the documentary advance. The deed now lists both our names. The house has electricity now, run from a solar array I installed with YouTube tutorials and Doreen's patient troubleshooting. We have running water from the spring, heated by a tankless system Mike helped me wire. Emma has her own room with a window facing the sunflowers. I built her a desk from salvaged barnwood, and she does her homework there every evening while I cook dinner on the propane stove. We've added something Walter didn't plan, a workshop in the old foundation's west corner where I teach carpentry basics to kids from town. Free classes, 2 evenings a week. Most students are fine, but a few show up hungry wearing coats too thin for the season, eyes recognizing what this place once meant. Those kids get extra help, and when they leave, I press a $20 bill into their hands and say, "This is from Walter. Keep building." Last week, Emma asked if we could drain the lake and recover Walter's house. I explained it's impossible. The dam controls the water level, and lowering it would flood properties downstream. The house beneath the ice will stay there, a permanent monument. "Is that sad?" she asked. "No," I said. "It's memory. Some things are meant to stay buried so we remember why they mattered." She thought about that. Then, "We should put a plaque by the shore, so people know his name." We did. Bronze mounted on stone reading, Walter Graves, 1921, 1986. Built a house, left a legacy. His foundation endures. The tourists photograph it now, along with the house under the ice. I've started keeping my own journal, following Walter's example. Emma reads it sometimes, asking questions about the early days, the cold, the hunger, the storm. I answer honestly. I don't hide the fear or the failures. Will you leave it for someone else? She asks. Like Walter did? Maybe, I say. Or maybe you'll be the one who leaves it. She likes that idea. Last month, the county approached me about buying back the submerged land, an offer of $60,000 to clear the title complications from the old boundary dispute. I considered it for exactly 30 seconds. Then I turned them down. The house under the ice stays. The land stays. The story stays. Because Walter was right, houses are just wood and stone. But the act of building, the showing up, the trying, the leaving something better than you found, that's what doesn't drown. Emma and I stand at the shore sometimes, looking down through clear ice at Walter's drowned house. It's beautiful in its frozen tomb, perfectly preserved, perfectly gone. A reminder that loss and legacy can occupy the same space. The house we built, Walter's vision made real through found materials and stubborn faith, stands behind us. It breathes with the seasons. It shelters us. And someday, maybe long after we're gone, it'll shelter someone else who needs it. That's the contract. That's the inheritance. Show up. Keep building. Leave something for whoever comes next. If this restoration story has you hooked, hit like. It helps us bring more lost places back to life. Some treasures are measured in dollars, but the ones that matter most are measured in shelter, memory, and the impossible grace of second chances. Subscribe for more true-to-life tales of rebuilding memory and hidden history. See you in the next story.